Hey everybody, good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? Welcome, 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 welcome. So I guess I'll start by saying my name is Lughnasadh, Druid Lughnasadh, founder of the Druid Circle, Druid Order of Blessed Stone and Wood, and Druid University. And this is from the stone. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is this idea that when we do from the stone, and pardon the outside noise, I can't go too deep into the woods or else I'm going to lose signal. So we're rather we're rather closer so that this way we could get reception. So I want to talk to you guys today, and you guys know that From the Stone is always seasonally based, and we talk about seasonal things, right? And so as a result of that, I think it's important that we see what's going on seasonally. And since this is Lughnasadh, I think that it's important to talk and continue to have talks on Lugh. There's an old song. And by the way, if you're watching this on a watch party or you're watching this on YouTube, just leave your comments. Although we do delete the watch parties, if you want, you could either go to YouTube and do the comments, or you could go to the original video and do the comments, because I do these live. All right, a couple things. Number one, there's an old song, and that many people know, and it's "He has the whole world in his hands," right? And I was thinking about this, and I was like, you know what? What is it that gives privilege, or lends privilege, I would say, to certain, to certain deities that have and encompass the whole world in their hands? And there's many different stories, right? And it depends on what story you believe in, and what you believe in is your truth. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to tell you that I'm some archdruid of druids, or some archdruid of archdruid, or Merlin of Merlins, or wizard of wizards, like these other highfalutin people. What I try to do is I say, look, listen, I'm just simply me, and this is it. So when we think about having the whole world in your hands, there is a story about Lugh having both his hands with the world, and on one side he has the world, and it's a dark world. It's the world in darkness, right? It's the night world, if you will. And on the other hand, it's the light world. It's the day world. It's the sunlight world, right? And he has that in his hand. So it's like there's two worlds that he has, right? And he's holding them in his hands. Now this has nothing to do, I don't want you to conflate this with him having one longer arm than the other, because of his spear that he needed to be accurate. But one of the things I do want to talk about is this idea of darkness and light, and carrying it with you. One of the things that we could do as druids is we can go ahead and see things for what they are. But we can't see things for what they are unless you completely leave unless we completely leave our custom zone, right? You can't see light in the dark. You can see light in the darkness, but only when there is darkness, and you can only see darkness, and you can only see darkness in the light only when there is light. And the reason for that is because what we do is we say, how is it that we can change our entire perspective? And one of the things we think about when we talk about the story of the god Lugh, one of the things we think about is this idea that how possible is it that we too carry the world in our hands? But we carry both. We carry a light world and we carry a dark world. We carry a world of a higher sort of ethereal plane and those energies that are both lower as well. And so when we're talking about Lugh, and we're talking about the two worlds, and we're talking about, it's the same, it's basically, what they're saying is it's the same world, it's just one is one is, you know, dark and one is light, and he has the whole world in his hands. You see what I'm saying? And you can't have the whole world in your hands at one specific time, because what the stories were back then were that at some point was the world in complete darkness. Well, you know, you didn't have those sorts of communications where it's light on one side and it's dark on another. And so I think it's a really beautiful story, because it's a story that says that as any deity or god or gods of your understanding, as a deity, you have all of these worlds, right? Adonai, God, that many people call God, is an air god, right? It's an air god, and that's what, you know, that's where Adonai means God, right? And you ask somebody, well, how do you say God in Hebrew? And they're like, Adonai. Well, there's also Elohim and whatnot, but I'm not going to go there for this talk. But I want to say that Adonai actually just means breath, or wind, or air, or sky. And it's also incredibly interesting, I find out, that when we start talking about the carrying both the worlds, carrying the dark and the light, I think it's very clear that we can see both. And as Druids, we step back and look and evaluate a situation. And I think that as a Druid myself, that's one of the things I did, right? I completely left politics, and, you know, and not only did I leave politics, but I didn't want, it was getting too crazy for me. And so when I left it, it was finally at that point that I was able to see it from another angle. But how many other things in our lives we see this from? How many other things in our lives do we see the light from? How many other times have we gotten the chance to look at a dark world and actually say, wow, I see the light? Or look at a light world and say, wow, I see the dark. And that goes even further and say, hey, look, are we living in a light world with darkness, or are we living in a dark world with lightness? And I think that if we are able to see the detriment and benevolence in both, we're able to carry both worlds in both hands, or each world in both hands. Lugh, the sky god, like the Christian God and like the Hebrew God, Lugh is one that is also an air god, right? Also an air god as well, and said, and in some cases, in some folklore, said to be the god of all gods. And what happens is that there's a number of times where we sit back and we look at it and we're saying, like, wow, you know, which of these deities do you want to believe? But I don't necessarily know whether or not each deity exists, or whether or not it's just one existence and three concepts of one existence. But when we're talking about having the world in his hands, I think that that is also very much, if you will, attributed to any and all of the stories we've learned, especially in folklore. Can we carry both is the thing. Can we carry both? Or do we just want to carry a light world? Or do we want to just carry a dark world? Sorry for the light. The sun is hitting the water around me and just beaming up in my face. The light world and dark world, right? And so I think that this is a really interesting thought for Lughnasadh, because we see a point where there's sort of it's the first harvest, but it's not like some big harvest. It's like berries and nuts and grains, it's bread and whatnot. And it's the first harvest, and as the first harvest, what do you end up doing? As the first harvest, you end up, I guess, in a way, you end up seeing that you don't necessarily know if there's going to be a greater harvest later on. One thing about harvesting and planting is that there's 3 plantings in a cycle of 8, and there's 3 harvests in a cycle of 8. And so right now, as the first harvest, Lughnasadh, which actually is the name for August, it's quite impressionable that I would say that we really begin to think about Lugh a little bit more during this time, and invoke the God of your understanding, or the gods of your understanding, that support holding the whole world in their hands. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we want to? Why wouldn't we want to do that? If anything, we would be invoking them for the ability to see beyond what we already are experiencing. If we're afraid to leave the cult of our own understanding, then how are we actually ever going to see what another person is saying? I don't necessarily think for an instant that that's even possible. Lughnasadh. And so as we begin to think about these talks, we begin to think about these we begin to think about these the talks, the feelings and the thoughts. Can we as people hold the world in our hands? The second part of the story is that Lugh was able to turn the lights out at night and turn the lights back on during the day. And as a thought, I think that that's really important as a thought. What if we were able to manipulate time in a way where we were able to see the light parts of our world and the dark parts of our world? But I think we have that power already. The story of having the whole world in your hands is understanding the power that the gods or God of your understanding gives you. That's how it works. It's how it's always worked. We must believe in an ethereal if we want to activate our corporeal. And what sense does it make if we're not activating both? Lughnasadh. So many think that the Druids are the Druids of nature, right? Druids that lived in nature, and that's important, because if that is the case, then they did see evidence of how the dark and the light work together. I think one of the problems with the zodiac readers and whatnot is that they one of the things is that it's too positive. You see what I'm saying? It's too positive. And one of the things we always done on the Druid Circle was to say, hey, let's keep it positive because we live in such a negative world. But when you're doing readings and when you're reading other people, and even in casual conversations, we have to bring up both the dark and the light. Being able to have the same control as Lugh, being able to have the same control as the gods, being able to say, can we make the lights come on? Can we make the lights go out? That's the magic. And you can do that. And I don't care whether or not, whatever color you are, or whoever the hell you sleep with. I mean, that has nothing to do with Druidism. That's why I am always against identity politics. Because in identity politics, you say, well, this person's more important than this person. And that's simply not the case. Sorry for the notification sounds. But I think that would be a great talk to have with you and the person that helps you and guides you along. I think it is real that we can delineate the dark and increase the light, but also do the opposite when we need to. Because the dark itself isn't really necessarily bad, nor is the light bad or good. It's just perspective. That doesn't necessarily mean that good and bad do not exist. Is stealing bad? Sure it is. But at the same time, there's absolutism and consequentialism as well. With that, I want you to think about understanding more and looking into this more, because I can't give you the whole entire story in just a few minutes. I can say that throughout Lughnasadh we're going to be talking about Lugh, because we talk about things that are seasonal. Maybe next year we'll talk about something else. But that's what we're going to be focusing on, because I think that in focusing on that, we are actually beginning to understand a little bit more about the season. And with that, whatever time it is, make it great. Whatever time it is, make it great. May the gods bless you. May the goddesses keep you. May the Fae and the mystical shine their light upon you. And may your ancestors remain with you forever and ever. World without end, Girawen. Bet Shegobra, Aranit. Est Lemo Guis. Be it thus. Be it thus. And continue to understand the Druidic philosophy, the main Druidic philosophy. And I'm not telling you not to listen to the other political orders out there, like, ADF and Nobot and those guys, and, Tree Path and those groups and whatnot, Unified Order. I'm telling you at the same time, though, that it's important to try to go outside of their indoctrination. That's what we need to do. Because when we're being indoctrinated and being told what to do, then it becomes their thing and not your thing. With that, have an awesome moment in time that you will make great, and keep it great too. Have a good one, everybody.